All right, so today we're going to be talking about how to validate a survey measure. So we're going to be doing a few things to do this. We're going to be, of course, constructing a survey out of multiple items, testing its inner item reliability, looking at whether the factor structure of the survey makes sense, basically testing the latent model of the variable or of the measure, and then also building a nomenological network. So before we get to any of that, though, let me explain a little bit about what this measure actually is. So we're going to be looking at these 18 items, 1 through 18, of RWA, which stands for right-wing authoritarianism. So right-wing authoritarianism, if you've never heard of it before, is a type of conservative, well, basically a right-wing political ideology that tends to be highly related with prejudice. So when we're measuring regular political conservatism, there is a sort of a weak to moderate relationship with prejudicial attitudes. People who are more politically conservative tend to be a bit more biased towards minority groups in general. But RWA is trying to isolate exactly the type of conservative tendencies that are most strongly related with prejudice. So RWA scale is highly related with basically political ideology that is itself related with prejudice against minority groups. So here we have the 18 items. RWA, just like the measures that you guys are going to be making, is composed of two separate factors. So here we have RWA-C and RWA-A. So each of these is followed by a C or an A, depending on what factor it belongs to. So C stands for conventionalism, and these are the part of right-wing authoritarianism scale that has to do with conventional ideas of morality. Morality. So in other words, basically old traditional views of morality. So this is a great example right here. So this is a statement. If you agree with this statement, you're high in conventionalism. So the idea that women should have to promise to obey their husbands when they get married. So it's a very traditional view of marriage. So that's one aspect or one factor of RWA is this conventional morality. The other aspect is the A, or authoritarianism. So this is the reason why we call it right-wing authoritarianism. So authoritarianism is basically a very strong respect and almost sort of a blind following of authority figures, particularly, of course, conservative authority figures. So let's see, this item is a good example of that. So if you agree with this, you're high in authoritarianism. So the established authorities in our country are usually smarter, better informed, and more competent than others, and the people can rely on them. So as we were talking about with general measurement theory, this maybe isn't a great item. It's in essence, not even double-barreled. It's almost quadruple-barreled. It has a lot of different aspects to it. We're going to kind of ignore that because this is a validated survey. Doesn't necessarily mean that the items are constructed all that well, but it does mean that it is a good measure of authoritarianism and conventionalism. So we're going to ignore maybe that some of these items aren't the best or the most well-worded. But basically, this is very clearly very high in authoritarianism. So someone who would agree with this has an almost blind following to authority figures. Okay, so like I was saying, all these items either are related with conventionalism or authoritarianism, but some of these are reverse scored. So what that means is basically some of these items, like conventionalism, for example, some of the items, if you agree with them, you're actually very low in conventionalism. Like we discussed before, this is a good thing. So a survey should always include reverse scored items in order to catch things like positivity bias, people just generally agreeing to things, or negativity bias, people generally disagreeing with things, or satisficing, meaning basically that they're ignoring the question or just sort of answering in the same way to every question because they basically don't care. So we always want to add in some items that are basically the reverse of what we're trying to measure. So let me try to find one of these. So let's see. Here we go. So RWA6 conventionalism is a reverse scored item. So if you answer high to this or strongly agree to this, you're actually very low in conventionalism. So this one reads, a lot of rules regarding modesty and sexual behavior are just customs which are not necessarily any better or holier than those other people follow. And you'll excuse the little typo here. So basically, again, if you strongly agree to this one, you're actually low in conventionalism. So some of these are actually, most of these are going to be high, meaning that if you answer strongly agree, you're higher in RWA, conventionalism or authoritarianism, but some are going to be reverse scored or low. So our first job is to pick apart and tell which of these need to be in effect reverse scored, and which of these do we need to reverse the score on. So for example, with this one, when we compute a final RWA variable, where basically we add all these up and divide by the total number, creating an average RWA score, we need to flip the score on this one. So if someone answered a 5 out of 5, agreeing that, basically these morals are just customs which aren't necessary to follow, then we need to actually switch that 5 to a 1, because really they're low in RWA, so that when we average across all the items, that 1 will compute to a low RWA score. So let's go ahead and first just sort of relabel these, marking whether they're high in RWA or low in RWA. So you can do this just by thinking to yourself, if someone strongly agreed to this, would they be high in conventionalism, if it's a C, or authoritarianism, or would they be low? So the first two we already decided are high items. So let's mark that just with a little lowercase h for high. And this is just going to make it easier once we start computing these items to quickly recognize whether they should be reverse scored or not. So the next one is important to protect the rights of radicals and deviants in all ways. That's actually a very low conventionalism score, because if you agreed, we need to protect the rights of people who are radicals or deviants. By the way, I love the language of this because it harkens back very much to the 1960s. It's funny that we still use this today. Then you're very low in RWA because, of course, you believe that people shouldn't follow conventions necessarily. So that's going to be a lowercase l for low. So I'm going to go through these kind of quickly, and hopefully it should make sense why I'm marking these either high or low in RWA. So our country desperately needs a mighty leader who will do what has to be done to destroy the radical new ways and sinfulness that are ruining us. Again, I love the way these are worded. It sounds like someone, an old man on a soapbox yelling these things out. Okay, clearly this is high RWA, if someone strongly agrees to this. The real keys to a good life are obedience, discipline, and sticking to the straight and narrow. That's high RWA. A lot of our rules, we already looked at this one. That's low in RWA. It is always better to trust the judgment of the proper authorities in government, blah, blah, blah. That's high. We should treat protesters and radicals with open arms and open minds. That's low. There is no one right way to live life. Everybody has to create their own way. That's low. So not following prey to conventions. Our country will be destroyed someday if we do not smash the perversions eating away at our moral fiber and traditional beliefs. That's very high in conventionalism. It may be considered old-fashioned by some, but having a normal, proper appearance is still a mark of a gentleman, and especially a lady. That's high. Very old-fashioned view. Everyone should have their own lifestyle, religious beliefs, and sexual preferences, even if it makes them different. That's low. A woman's place should be wherever she wants to be. The days when women are submissive to their husbands and social conventions being strictly belong to the past. Sorry, there's a little long here. That's low. What our country really needs is a strong, determined leader who will crush evil and take us back to our true path. Very high. Obedience and respect for authority are most important virtues that children should learn. That's, of course, high. The only way our country can get through crisis ahead is to put some tough leaders in power and silence the troublemakers spreading bad ideas. That's high. Our country needs free thinkers who will have the courage to defy traditional ways. Of course, that's low. And the last one, there is nothing wrong with premarital sexual intercourse. That's also low, because that's, obviously not an old moral view. Okay, so now we have them all labeled as either being high in RWA or low in RWA. So now what we need to do is create a version of these. We have one version of each one that is high in RWA, meaning basically that for all the ones that end in an L that are low, we need to reverse those scores. So if someone really strongly agrees that there's nothing wrong with premarital sexual intercourse, we need to change that 5, because they're strongly agreeing with this one, to a 1 out of 5, meaning basically that they're very low in RWA, so that with all the items, we have at least one version where a 1 out of 5 means low in RWA, and a 5 out of 5 means high in RWA. So basically we need to create a version of all these so that they're pointing in the same direction. Okay, so to do that, we're going to transform, there we go, a recode into different variables. So here all we're going to do is basically take all the ones that end in an L and put them in the input variable box. So I'm just going to select all these. You can select multiple ones by hitting the command key on a Mac, or the shift, or actually the control key on a PC. We can enter them all in at once, make sure we have all of them here. So these should all end in an H, and these should all end in an L. It actually turns out we have no authoritarian ones that end in an L. All of them end in an H. We have many more conventionalism items that end in an L, and just more conventionalism items in general. So that's one of maybe the weaknesses of this scale, is there is no authoritarianism items that are reverse scored, but we'll kind of ignore that and go on. So basically what we're going to do is create a reverse scored version of all of these items. So to do that, go ahead and click on old and new values. And since this is on a 5-point scale, if someone answered a 1 of these items, disagreeing that premarital sex is A-OK, basically that means they're high in authoritarianism, so we're going to convert those scores to a 5. And we're going to likewise just sort of go through the scale reversing those. So if someone answered a 2, we're going to make that a 4 in the scale. If someone answered a 3, that's the total middle point of the scale, they're still going to remain a 3. And we have to include this, the 3 equals 3, because if we didn't include this little part right here, all the 3s would be lost. They wouldn't be translated into the new variable. So we have to include 3 equals 3, even though it seems a little redundant. So then continuing on with the reversing, so a 4 is going to equal a 2. And then again, if someone answered a 5 to these, meaning they're really low in RWA, we're going to turn this into a 1. So we're basically taking a 1 through 5 scale and reversing it here, 5 through 1. So you got that, so let's go ahead and click continue. And since we're going to be making new variables, we have to give them new names. So click on this, and we're going to give them the same name they had before, so RWA3_C for conventionalism. But now we're changing it to a high score, meaning that 5 out of 5 means high WA, 1 out of 5 means low RWA. So let's go ahead and change all these. Again, just copying their name, but ending with an H. Oops. Oh yeah. We're going to put a 6 in there, ending in an H instead of an L. And this will make it very easy for us to go back through and go, okay, we need, RWA 1 through 18, but we only want to use all the high versions in order to compute a final RWA variable. That way they're all pointed in the same direction. 5 out of 5 meaning high RWA, and a 1 out of 5 meaning low RWA. You can tell I'm a guy because it's hard for me to talk and type at the same time. Like all guys, I'm a bad multitasker when it comes to language tasks. Okay, there we go. So we have all of them converted over here from low to high, but the same numbers here. We have, of course, the reverse scored here. So go ahead and click OK. We can go back to our data set here, and we're just going to have all these new variables here that we've just created, where they're all the flip versions of the ones we have up here. Okay, so what we're going to do now is do something called Cronbach's alpha analysis. I almost thought of Cohen's D analysis. That's something different. We're going to do Cronbach's alpha analysis on these items. And what we're going to do is examine these one factor at a time. So first we're going to inspect all the items having to do with conventionalism, all the ones ending in C. And again, we're only going to look at the ones that end with a CH. So whenever we run into one that's, a CL, we're going to go down here and grab the version of that ends in a CH that's been reverse scored. And what Cronbach's alpha does is it looks at how much each of the items in a particular scale, in this case in the individual factor of this scale, hang together, how much they're measuring the same thing. So let's go ahead and do this. I'll explain a little bit more once we get to the analysis. So go to Analyze, and this is going to be under Scale. This is a type of scale analysis, and this is called Reliability Analysis. It really should be called Inner Item Reliability because that's the type of reliability we're going to be looking at. So go ahead and click on that. Basically what we're going to do is put in all the individual items having to do with conventionalism, but remember only the ones that end in an H so that they're all pointing in the same direction. So we're going to skip this one that ends in a CL and just hit all the ones that end in an H. Okay, so CL, CL, CL. So actually there's a lot of items here that end in a CL, but thankfully we've already computed all these down here. So again, we can just sort of select all these You can do this by hitting the first one and then clicking Shift and then hitting the last one and then putting them all in there. So we should end up having 12 items. Let me make sure I have all of them here that are for conventionalism. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We do. Okay, we're already set at an alpha right here, which is Chromeback's alpha. That's perfect. Make sure there's nothing else. So basically, oh, that's right. So basically what we need here, all of this is fine. We don't really want a lot of extra outputs. But one thing that is nice to have is this one right here. So scale if item deleted. We're going to get to why that's really important here in a bit. But go ahead and just make sure that's clicked and click continue and OK. Okay, so we're going to end up with some outputs here, several outputs. So one of the first ones that we want to look at here is just the Chromeback's alpha scale. So it says in of items we have 12 items. The Chromeback's alpha is a general estimate of how well all these items are measuring the same thing or hanging together. So in general we want a Chromeback's alpha at or above a 0.7. In essence what it's doing is it's taking each individual item and correlating it with all the other items. So what it would do is take, for example, item 1 and correlating it with the other 11 items. And then it's going to take item 2 and then correlate it with the other 11 items, all the way down the list until you get, in this case, 12 different correlations, because there's 12 different items. And then it's going to average across all these correlations. And it's not quite as simple as that, but in essence, it's pretty much an average correlation among each one item and all the other items. And so you want a pretty high correlation between all of them, which is why you want a 0.7 or higher, meaning a very high relationship or high similarity between each item and all the other remaining items. So right here we have a Chromeback's alpha of 0.835, which is really good. That's a very high Chromeback's alpha, well above 0.7. So that's great. Okay, so what we want to do here though, we look at the item total statistics, is see if this Chromeback's alpha score would actually increase if we deleted any one of these items, because hey, maybe we could make this a little bit better. So what we're really going to do is just pay attention to this last column here. We have the items over here, so if the item has a label, like we did with these original items, it has the actual wording of the item here as the label, it's going to come up as the label. If not, for all these ones where you reverse score, we didn't input labels for those, so it's just going to come up with a name, which is just fine either way. But again, we're going to pay attention to this last column, so let's see if this number of 0.835 would go up if we deleted. See, it says Chromeback's alpha if item deleted, if we deleted any one of these items. So the first one, nope, it would actually go down if we deleted it. Going on down, nope, nope. And then yes. So if we deleted the item, it may be considered old-fashioned by some, but having a normal, proper appearance is still the mark of a gentleman and especially lady, our Chromeback's alpha would actually go up a bit. Now it's a very minor amount. It goes up from 0.835 to 0.843. So in other words, it goes up 0.008 points. So if we were actually concerned with inner item reliability, like for a real analysis, we might go, well, this would go up so little, the Chromeback's alpha, if we deleted this, that really we shouldn't even worry about deleting it. It makes such a marginal difference. But we're going to go ahead and consider that maybe this would be worth, increasing. So this might be an item that we would like to throw out of our scale because it doesn't hang with the other items quite as much. Basically, if we threw it out, the other items would hang together a bit better. There's also this item right here, right below it, RWA3, which I don't know the wording of that right off the bat. Well, actually, we could look right here. So basically, it is important to protect the rights of radicals and deviants in all ways. It's that item. So if we deleted that item, let me scroll back down, it would also go up to the exact same amount. So we could delete either one of these and it would go up. Now you might think logically, okay, well let's just delete both of these. We cannot do that. That's one of the things about checking and rechecking the alpha level. With one item deleted, you don't want to delete multiple items in the recheck it, because each of these is only estimated if you delete this one item. If you end up deleting both of them or multiple items at once, these estimates could be totally wrong. So in other words, if we deleted both items, it could be that our Chromeback's alpha actually falls well below the 0.835 that we currently have. Again, this estimate is only if you delete one item at a time. So what we want to do here, let's go ahead and delete one of these items and see if in fact deleting the other one would still increase our Chromebacks alpha score. So let's pick on this one first. So it may be considered old-fashioned, blah, blah, blah. So let's take out this particular item. So the way to do that, we're not going to actually remove it from our data set, we're just going to remove it from this analysis. So let's go back up here to Analyze, Scale, Reliability Analysis. And actually a way to even bypass having to do all that, you can click on this little button right here. This is Recall Recently Used Dialogues and basically functions. And right here it has all the stuff that we've done so far, and actually some stuff that I did in past data sets. It remembers. So right here it has our reliability analysis. We can just click on that. So that's a quick and easy way to repeat what we just done. So right here, if we pause on any of these, it's going to tell us, I think it should tell us which, oh, you know what, it's not going to bring up the dialogue, but actually we can figure it out pretty easily because the first four here are our first four original items that were all ended up being an H anyway. So actually we can pretty easily guesstimate that this item right here is RWA 11. If we weren't quite sure, we could go back and look at the labels for each of these, but I am absolutely sure that this item is this label. Okay. So basically, again, we only want to remove one at a time if removing that one would increase our alpha level. So let's go ahead and remove that one from the analysis. We just kick it out and just click OK. So sometimes you'll notice that our estimate is actually a little bit different than what it actually is. It's kind of interesting how, you know, even these predictions aren't spot on perfect. So we kicked out that item. It did in fact go up, but it didn't go up to 0.843. It went to 0.840. It's such a minor difference. It's really negligible, but still sometimes your prediction will be a little bit off. But still, it went up a little bit. So it went up by 0.005. So it's pretty marginal, but let's say that matters. But let's see if we kick out any other items, if it would indeed increase a bit more. So let's scroll down. So all of these doesn't look like increasing anymore. Oh, this one, oh, still the same old culprit, RWA3. If we deleted that one, it would in fact go up. So in this case, we would be in the right to have deleted both those items at once. But again, we don't know that right off the bat, so we have to do it one at a time. But yes, indeed, this kicking out this item will still increase it, and in fact, by quite a bit, by almost 0.01, which actually isn't quite as negligible an amount. So let's go ahead and do that. So again, we just click this little recall button, and then we bring up the analysis. We know it's RWA3. We can kick it out. Again, you want to do this one at a time. Click OK. And then in fact, oh, that's great. Actually went up even a little bit more. We went up to 0.851, which is again a very, very high alpha score, well above 0.7, which is considered acceptable. Let's see if kicking out any other items would increase our alpha score. And we can look down here, and none of these are beyond 0.851. So basically right here, we've kicked out all the items that aren't quite hanging with the scale. So we're left with basically these items here, and then these reverse scored items. So all these hang together very well, creating a very high alpha level. So if we were going to write up this analysis, we could say something like, you know, we conducted a Chromebacks alpha and initially had a score of 0.835, but we discovered if we excluded the item, you know, it may be considered old-fashioned, blah, 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 that it would go up to 0.84. So we excluded that item, and then we further discovered that by excluding this item, RWA3, whatever that corresponds with, you know, is important to protect the rights of radicals and deviants in all ways, that it would go up further. So we did that, and it went up to 0.851. We discovered that removing any other items wouldn't have any positive effect on the Chromebacks alpha, so our final scale resulted in these, it ends up being 10 items. See, N of items right here is 10. So this 10 item scale seems to be the best scale that we can construct currently with the highest rating of inter item reliability, or the highest Chromebacks alpha. You can say it either way because it means the same thing. Okay, so that's sort of the way you could maybe word it in a write-up. So we have our final scale here for conventionalism. Let's go ahead and move on to authoritarianism. Let's see if we can increase that Chromebacks alpha score by any amount. Again, this is still a reliability analysis, so we could just go click here to reliability analysis, or we could, of course, do the long way. Oops, there we go, of analyzing scale reliability analysis. But let's take out all these items, so hit the reset button to just reset everything. And now put in the authoritarianism items. One's an A, then an AH. And actually there's none of these that ended in AL because none of these were reverse scored. So we'll go ahead and just put these in. We can just double click to pop them in there. There should be 6 of these because 6 of the 18 items were authoritarianism. So here we got 6 items. Perfect. Should be still, oh, actually we do need to select this again. Scale if item deleted. For some reason it got rid of that little part. Click continue. We were doing an alpha modeling, so that looks good. So go ahead and click OK. Let's see what we get. So this Chromebax Alpha is a little bit lower than the other one, but still well above 0.7, well above acceptability ratings. It of course includes all 6 items. That's N of 6. So it has a 0.815. So if we look down here, this one actually would increase a little bit, 0.816, but oh my goodness, that is such a marginal level of increase. I think we can go ahead and just ignore that. I mean, really, if it's only going to increase by 0.001, there's no reason to really take heed on that. But it looks like actually if we deleted any of the others, it would go down quite a bit. So it'd actually fall, 0.03 or 0.04 points if we delete any of the other items here. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and call it that this one is perfectly fine the way it is. A little bit of a rule of thumb here is that once you get down to about 5 or 6 items, you really do want to be cautious in deleting any of those, because any suitable scale that really covers in its entirety an entire factor or an entire variable should at least have about 5 survey items. Of course, that's a real quick and dirty rule. It doesn't apply to every variable perfectly, but really once you get below 5 items or close to it, 6 items, you should only really kick out individual items if your Chromebax Alpha would really shoot up significantly. So if you had a Chromebax Alpha of 0.6 that was well below 0.7, and one of these could kick it up above 0.7 to an acceptable level, then maybe that would be worth, or that would then be definitely worth considering kicking out. But getting such a marginal increase really isn't worth it. So when you guys do your own analyses for your LTA assignment or learning team assignment, keep that in mind. If you end up kicking out so many items that you get down to 5 items, you should really stop there. So unless kicking out one more is going to shoot your Chromebax Alpha level up to an acceptable level, going from unacceptable below 0.7 to an acceptable level above 0.7, you really shouldn't do it. You should at least have 5 items left in your scale, even if your Chromebax Alpha would still be improved a bit by deleting more. Okay. So again, we'll probably talk more about that once we get to actually analyzing your guys' data. So we're going to say that this one's good, that all those 6 items are hanging together nicely. So basically what we have here is we're going to be, in effect, ignoring some of the conventionalism items when we compute our final conventionalism score, but accepting all the authoritarianism items. But let's go back up here to our conventionalism rating. So these are all the ones we want to include in our final conventionalism survey. So basically we want to have kicked out, let's figure out, because we know we want to kick out RWA3, let's figure out what this original one was. It may be considered old-fashioned. Which one is that? So it may be considered old-fashioned right here. Okay, so RWA11. So just for my own memory, so that when we compute these variables, we're going to exclude RWA3, and RWA11, because those, if we deleted them, the Chromebax Alpha went up. Okay, so now let's go ahead and compute these factor scores. So what we're going to do that is just to basically create an average score of conventionalism and an average score of authoritarianism. So this is going to involve a computation. We're going to be adding up all these and dividing by the total number to create an average score. So it's transform compute. And let's go ahead and create RWA underscore let's make a little longer title, we'll just call auth, because I don't want to make it too long a title, but we'll start with the authoritarianism scale. So with these, we're just going to create an average, so we want to start with an open open parentheses, and then enter all these in. You can just double click to enter them in, and then add them up. You want to make sure, of course, to only end ones that end in an H for high, so they're all pointing in the same direction. But with the authoritarianism scale, they all end in an H. There aren't any reverse scored ones, so that makes our job a bit easier. So you just want to include those that end in an AH. And there are only 6 of them, so we end our parentheses here and go divide by 6. So this is going to create one variable that is the average of all the authoritarianism factor items in this variable. So go ahead and click OK. It's going to come up here that indeed it did it, but click back to the data, make sure it's in there, and it is RWA auth for authoritarianism. Maybe we should even label it, make sure we know what that is. So we go RWA authoritarianism factor. There we go. Let me actually just collapse this label a bit so it doesn't keep, there we go. Okay, so now we want to do that same thing for conventionalism. So go up to transform, compute. We can reset this to get rid of all this. And let's name this RWA conv for conventionalism. So this one, we do have to be careful to not include any of the low or reverse scored items. So we just want to include the high ones. So RWA1 is fine. This one we want to ignore for right now and then pop in or sort of add. RWA5, ignore all these that end in an L. Go to this one. And then remember RWA11 we don't want to include because if we include that, the alpha score goes down. So again, we want to ignore that one entirely. So all the rest of these ended in a CL. So we want to go back down here and include, again, all these converted ones in a CH. But again, RWA3, that was the other one that we want to ignore because if we included that item, our alpha level went down. So remember, we excluded those 2 of the 12 items. So let's just go ahead and add the rest of them in here, though, because those items were all fine in our Chromebacks alpha analysis. And we should end up with 10 items. So we 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's great. So we end it, divide by 10. That all checked out here, so click OK. And right here, maybe just for our own benefit, we can type in RWA conventionalism factor. Think about how these words are spelled. Those are kind of long ones. Okay, so now we have our 2 factors. So let's check to make sure. This is going to make sure that our latent model makes sense, because the latent model presupposes or theorizes that these 2 factors, authoritarianism and conventionalism, are both related to each other quite highly. That's necessary for our factor structure because they should be making up the same basic variable of right-wing authoritarianism. They're just 2 different aspects of it. So to make sure that these are similar to each other, we need to do a correlational analysis, see how highly these are correlated. Theoretically, they should be correlated significantly, positively, because both are positively or related to each other. We expect if someone's high in authoritarianism, they should also be high in conventionalism, because these 2 things both make up RWA. And again, this is all on a theoretical level based on previous research. But we shouldn't expect these 2 factors to be so highly related that they're basically redundant, meaning that if you measured authoritarianism, you basically also measured conventionalism, and you only really need to measure one. So if the correlation is at 0.8 or above, we say that that's the level where they're so highly correlated with each other that they're redundant and you really don't need to measure both of them. So it should be significantly positively correlated, but not so highly correlated as to be a 0.8 or above. So let's go ahead and run a correlation analysis between these. So you can do this by going to Analyze, Correlate, Bivariate, because we're looking at correlation between 2 variables at a time. So bi meaning 2, variate meaning variable. And then we just want to put in these 2 variables. So they're at the bottom here, RWA conventionalism and authoritarianism. Just enter these both at the same time or one at a time, whichever one you want. Everything else is good. Pearson two-tailed is all fine. Let's see, nothing under options. Okay, so everything looks good. So we can click OK. So again, we expect these to be positively, significantly correlated, but not at 0.8 or above. And we can basically we only need to pay attention to one of these boxes. So if we look at this first box, for instance, it's meaningless. It basically says RWA authoritarianism factor is correlated with RWA authoritarianism factor basically itself at a perfect 1. Well, that's kind of a duh because it's correlated with itself perfectly. But this is the one we're interested in, RWA conventionalism. How much does that correlate with RWA authoritarianism? So right here, it correlates just as we had hoped. It's significant. You can see right here that the sig two-tailed is well below 0.05, so it's actually 0.000. It could go quite a bit on before it hits to, an actual number, so well below 0.05. But it's not so high as to be a 0.8 or above. So we'd say these are positively related to each other, conventionalism and authoritarianism, but not so much that they're redundant with each other. And then these boxes are just the same thing reversed over here. So this is, the correlation between conventionalism and authoritarianism right here. And this box over here is the correlation between authoritarianism and conventionalism. So they're always going to be mirror images of each other. And again, this is just the relationship between conventionalism and conventionalism, it with itself right here. So we really only need to pay attention to one of these boxes. Okay, so perfect. We could, in our write-up, say basically, as we hypothesized, the conventionalism and authoritarianism factor were significantly positively correlated, but not so much so that they could be deemed redundant. And of course, you maybe put in the correlational figures right here. Okay, so we've seen a couple of things. We've improved upon our conventionalism scale by kicking out a couple of items. We couldn't improve on the authoritarianism scale, and now we've just confirmed that these are two positively related factors but aren't redundant, so it makes sense with our factor structure. So let's go ahead and create from these one RWA variable, basically the one variable that encapsulates both of these factors. So to do that, this is a really easy one. Just go to Analyze, Transform, Compute, because we're going to be computing this RWA variable. And let's go ahead and reset, get rid of all this. Let's just call this simply RWA, because this is our final right-wing authoritarianism variable score. So you might think, okay, we're going to need to add all these items up and divide by the total number, but actually no, what we want to do is just add up these two, because remember, these are the average authoritarianism items, and this is the average conventionalism items. So go ahead and do open parentheses and just add these two up. So we're adding up the two factors that should make up the entire variable and dividing by 2. So one of the reasons why we don't want to do the individual items, why we in fact just want to add up these factor scores, is because each of these factors is made up of a different number of items. So conventionalism is made up of 10 items, authoritarianism is made up of 6 items. So if we added up all these items individually and divided by the total number, which would be 16 total items, remember we kicked out 2 of them, then our RWA variable would be much more weighted toward conventionalism than authoritarianism because we have more items here. We don't want that because theoretically, RWA is equally made up of authoritarianism and conventionalism. So what we want to do is take their average authoritarianism score, their average conventionalism score, so that they're weighted perfectly equally and just divide by 2. So that our final variable is theoretically made up of 50% authoritarianism, 50% conventionalism. So that's sort of the theoretical reason why we're doing this, but again, long story short, basically when you're making up your variable score, you want to just add up how many factors you have and then divide by that number of factors. You don't want to add up all the individual items. Okay, so go ahead and click OK. And now we have our RWA variable. We can even just put in your right-wing authoritarianism. There we go. Okay, so this is our final variable score. And actually, if we look at data view, we have, their ratings on all these individuals, but then we get to this level at the very end. These are all just numbers. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how right-wing authoritarian are they? So we have some people who are quite low. This one's really low, really close to a 1 out of 5. And then we're going to have some people who are higher. Of course, this is a very liberal college data set, so we're not going to have too many that are actually that high. It looks like the highest we're getting really is like a 3.5, around a 3.5. I'm not seeing any 4s. So this whole sample is pretty low in right-wing authoritarianism, which is what we'd expect from a young college sample. Okay, so going back to variable view, just wanted to show you sort of what the data looks like. So right now we have our variable that's composed of the 2 factors. The last thing we want to do is construct a nomenological network, basically to see if this one variable that we've created, this one RWA output variable, is related in the way we'd expect with other related variables. So theoretically, this RWA variable should be related with things like prejudice. So along with measuring all these RWA items here, I've also measured with this data set some items we'd expect to be related with RWA, like attitudes towards gay men and attitudes towards lesbians. Let me expand the labels here so we can read the full thing. So right here, basically, this is on a 1 to 5 scale, like all the other ones. I think, yeah, actually, I'm sure all of the ones that we're measuring today are on a 1 to 5 scale. except for this one, which is a yes or no answer. We'll get to that one in a second. But basically, a high score here of 5 out of 5 means high prejudice towards lesbians for the ATL, and for the ATG, attitudes towards gay men, a high score means high prejudice towards gay men. So we'd expect, theoretically, that our RWA scale should be positively related, significantly positively related to both of these. So that's something we can test our nomological network. We have a bunch of variables here. So going up from here, moral traditionalism is another measure of how traditional people's moral beliefs are. So these are also including items like, marriage should only be between a man and a woman, all the way to, what's another very moral traditional one? Some of these are very much in line with the RWA scale itself, like, it's good for men to dress up in a suit and women to dress up in a dress, all these type of things. But anyway, high scores here, so close to a 5, equals really traditional moral beliefs. And a low score means very non-traditional moral beliefs. So we'd expect that this would also be positively related with RWA. Protestant work ethic, some research shows that people who believe, basically Protestant work ethic is the belief that if you work hard enough, you should be able to attain anything in life. That's also been shown to be related with conservatism in general, so that should be positively with RWA as well. So basically what we're doing here is when we measured RWA, we also took the liberty of measuring a bunch of other variables that we believe should be related with RWA. So if in fact if we're measuring RWA correctly on a theoretically correct or accurate level, we should find that these are all positively correlated with our final RWA scale. And going ahead and explain a few more of these. So humanitarianism, we should actually expect it to be negatively related with RWA. So humanitarianism is the belief that we should take care of those who can't take care of themselves. This is actually tends to be negatively related with Protestant work ethic, because this is the belief that everybody should be able to take care of themselves if they just work hard enough. So these two tend to be negatively related. So we should expect humanitarianism to be negatively related with RWA. So again, we're not just picking these out of thin air. I measured these because we expected them to be related with this variable. I also measured the big 5 here. So out of the big 5, the only one that we really expect to be related to RWA is openness to new experience. So this one we would expect to be negatively related to RWA, because remember, RWA is very conventional beliefs, and openness to new experience tends to be much more radical, novel belief systems related to this variable. So that again is a negative relationship we should expect. So with a lot of these, we would say these, right here, should be positively related with it. And so that would be a test of the convergent validity of RWA. These, like humanitarianism, openness to new experience, we should be expecting to be negatively related to it. So that'd be a test of the divergent validity of RWA. And then there's quite a few in here, like conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, that we don't have any theoretical reason to believe to be related to RWA. So for these, we'd actually expect them to be basically not at all related to RWA. So this would be a good test of the discriminant validity of RWA. So then we have just a couple of others. We have political beliefs, where high numbers of 5 out of 5 means highly conservative. Of course, we'd expect that to be positively related with RWA. How important is religion in your life? High numbers mean highly important. We expect that to be positively related with RWA. And then, do you consider yourself to be a fundamentalist, yes or no? So this is the only one that isn't on a scale of 1 to 5, but again, we'd expect yeses to be correlated with RWA. And here we have yes correlated or signaled as a 2, no as a 1. So since the higher number is a yes, we'd expect it to be positively related with RWA, meaning a high RWA scale should be related with a higher number on this, in other words, a yes as opposed to a no for religious fundamentalism. So here I have a bunch of variables, basically all of these variables right here, from political beliefs down to ATL, should be in some way reliably related to RWA, except for these 4 right here, which should have no theoretical relationship with it. So that'd be the test of discriminant validity, things that you wouldn't expect to be related with it. So you might think, wow, that's going to be a lot of analyses we have to run. This is, let's see, about 9, 12, about 13 different variables. But in fact, we can run this in one single analysis. So basically what we're going to do is we go down here to correlate by variate. We're going to create one big correlation table that includes all of these at once. So basically what we want to do, we'll go ahead and kick these out because we're not interested in the individual factors anymore. We're just interested in this one variable, RWA, the composition of these two factors. And then we're going to include all the things we think might be correlated with it. So again, everything from political beliefs all the way down to ATL. And I'm just clicking the first one, holding the shift key, and then clicking the last one. And we can put those all in there. And so these are all theoretically in some way related, or in this case right here, not related with RWA. So let's go ahead and test out how good we're measuring RWA by how well our predictions are met. So go ahead and click OK. And we're going to come up with a big table here. See how big this table is. But thankfully, all we need to pay attention to, let me blow this up a little bit. So all we need to pay attention to is this first column, because this is right here, right-wing authoritarianism and its relationship with all the other variables that we put in here. So, of course, right-wing authoritarianism, perfectly related with itself. Well, who would have guessed, right? We can ignore that box. But let's look at the other one. So, we expected a positive relationship with political beliefs, meaning conservatism. And again, we get a significant positive relationship. So, it's significant here, well below 0.005. We can also tell that at a glance because if it's significant, it's going to put asterisks by the correlation. It actually says at the very bottom right here, says one asterisk is significant at a 0.05 level, two asterisks are significant at a 0.01 level. So, oops, I went way too far up. Here we go. So right here, we have two asterisks well below 0.01 even. So right here, hypothesis confirmed, we could write up just as we hypothesized RWA was significantly positively related with political beliefs, or maybe we would want to say a political conservatism, because that's really what we're measuring. How important is religion in your life? Remember, we estimated this would be a positive, significant relationship. It, in fact, is. This one, though, do you consider yourself to be a fundamentalist? We expect it to be positive and significant. This one, it turns out, did not go according to our hypothesis. So we might write that up to counter to our hypothesis. We did not find a significant positive relationship between right-wing authoritarianism and religious fundamentalism. Because again, you're usually not going to be perfect in all of your hypotheses. If you were, then you've created the perfect scale. That usually doesn't happen. Although this one was very close to being significant, it only had to be a 0.05. So in other words, this only had to be a 0.054 to be significant. So it's really, really close, but still it's non-significant, so we'd have to report it as thus. Okay, so coming down here, let me get rid of that. Okay, so we expected a negative relationship between RWA and openness. In fact, we find that. And we expected no relationship between RWA and the other big 5 factors, and in fact, we find that as well, all the way down the board. So no relationship with conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, or neuroticism. So far, all of our hypotheses except for one have been confirmed. And again, this one was very close. And in fact, if you get something this close, you might even want to say in the write-up, while the hypothesis was not confirmed, we were, in this case, very, very close to a significant finding as expected. Because that's so close it almost is worth warranting in the paper itself. But that's sort of up to you guys. Okay, so going back down, remember this first column was all relationship with RWA. So again, we expected a negative relationship with humanitarianism. We ended up finding that. A positive relationship with Protestant work ethic. Found that as well. So remember, the little asterisks means significant. Moral traditionalism, a positive relationship. Definitely found that. And then these two, a positive relationship with prejudice towards gay men and lesbians. Again, boom, yes, and yes. So this shows how good this right-wing authoritarianism scale is. And this is something I don't expect all of your hypotheses to come out correct. That would be pretty amazing if you constructed a totally new survey and it ended up exactly the way you thought it would be. But this survey has been around for a long time. It's been validated in many, many hundreds of studies. It's a really, really great survey at getting at exactly what we hope it will. So it's not too surprising here that pretty much all of our hypotheses turned out to be correct. This is the only one that didn't turn out to be correct, but again, it was very, very close. You do, of course, want to write this up on an individual basis. You could say something like, according to our hypotheses, right-wing authoritarianism was positively significantly related with political beliefs, religious importance, negatively related with openness experience, blah, blah, blah. So you want to write all these up. Okay, and of course, also in your actual LTA assignment, I don't expect you to do this many different variables in your nomenological network. This is a little bit more extensive than what you guys are going to be doing, but I just wanted to give you a good idea of what this process is like. You pick variables that you think will be related with your, or at least should be related with your hypothetical variable, and then test it to see if, in fact, it is related significantly and in the right direction, or, in the case of discriminant validity, that it isn't related when it shouldn't be. Okay, so that's all the survey analyses we're going to do again, just to sort of, we can look at our output to see of all the stuff we've done. So we labeled all these high and low, depending on whether they're high or low in RWA. We computed, the authoritarianism scale based on our reliability analysis. So we learned that if we kicked out RWA 11 and then kicked out RWA 3, we ended up with a very high Cronbach's alpha, and it wouldn't have been significantly improved by kicking out anything else. So we ended up constructing our authoritarianism scale out of those 10 items. And then we figured out that our authoritarianism scale, this was conventionalism. I misspoke before. These are the conventionalism scale. With our authoritarianism scale, we found out that really we didn't need to kick out any of the items. Again, this one was only going to increase it by a tiny amount, so that's fine. We can just ignore that. So we're going to keep in all 6 of the items. So we include our authoritarianism scale here, and this is where it basically says we compute authoritarianism, conventionalism, and then we tested the correlation between those 2 factors and found, just as we expected, they're positively related, but not so much so that they're redundant. It's not a 0.8 or higher, but it's still positive and significant, so just as we hypothesized. So from these 2 factors, authoritarianism and conventionalism, we created our final RWA variable, our final latent variable, out of the 2 factors. And then we tested a big nomenological network, and all but one of our predictions ended up being significant, or basically found to be true. So we can say, in a nutshell, that this is a really, really good measure of RWA, at least based on all of these findings. Okay, so that's it for this lab.